Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. This is Sinikka Waugh with Your Clear Next Step, and I'm so delighted that you've joined us on the Even Better podcast. I am here once again today with my friend and colleague, Joel Smith. Delighted to have Joel. Joel, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's always great to be on your podcast. I love doing this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. So Joel, we've continued to work together on a variety of different things, and we're working on some products around change and some things that we're doing in the churches and coaching programs and just a whole variety of things. I am so excited to hear your description of a program that you're working on in particular, but it's really a new way of putting things together. I've not heard this approach before, and I'm super excited about it. And you're calling it the 5 hurdles to maximum impact. And as I stop and think about our listeners and who's interested in this, I think everybody's interested in this. I think everybody's got to stop and listen to this, because this is about maximum impact wherever you happen to be. And so Joel, take us through the journey a little bit. Okay, how did we get there? What do we need to know before we talk about these 5 hurdles?
Yeah, so I came up with this because my passion is to really help people get unstuck. And so if somebody is stuck, that means that they're at a place they don't know how to get to their next level, right? And so, and we see this, and we all struggle with this at times. And so I really thought through, what are the different stages of life or stages of development in our lives or in our careers that we need to navigate through. And so I came up with 6 stages that I really believe are pretty common and pretty typical. And these stages are, it can apply to your life. For instance, the first stage is the dependent stage. So this could be like a child, completely dependent on an adult. It could be a new employee at a new job, completely dependent on their supervisor. It could be you just had a new child and for the first time, and so now you're completely dependent on other people to help you know how to be a parent, that type of thing. So really, it cycles through and it begins new with each session in life, and so each phase of life. The one thing about the stages is they take time to grow through and to mature, so they do take some time. So I'll just talk about what those stages are here real quick. The first stage is the dependent stage, and that's the you do it stage. You're not able to do it yourself, so somebody else has to do it for you. And so you're unable to solve your own problems or to make your own decisions, right? And there is an upside to that, and that is that there's always room to grow. There's always one way to go, and that's up, right? The challenge on this dependent stage, though, is if you don't, then you're always going to be dependent on somebody else. And you've seen people before that are maybe a little older, but they're stuck in maybe a dependent stage. So the second stage is the independent stage, and that's the I do it stage. So this is where you can make your own decisions and you can take care of your own basic needs. You're no longer dependent on other people. But if you don't progress, you'll always desire to operate in your own terms or on your own terms. And so that's a tough thing too. That's where the independence comes from. You want to do things your own way. You can take care of yourself, but you want to do things your own way. The interdependent stage is the we do it stage. And this is where you seek win-win. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. We get more done together than if we do it separately. And this is where, it's where we buy into a common theme. The upside to that is that, consolidated efforts yield greater returns. But the challenge to that is that within this group or team, if you don't have strong leadership at this interdependent stage, the individuals could fall back to the independent stage. So the interdependent stage really requires leadership to hold it all together and to create the visions. The fourth stage is the mastery stage, and this is the we do it well stage. So we're working on it. We're pursuing excellence, and we're trying to drive our daily habits, and we're trying to figure out how to do it well, really well, kind of at the top of our industry. We're figuring that out. The upside is that when we become really exceptional at something, then we can be set apart. We can stand out above the crowd. The challenge is that if we don't use that skill effectively, then it'll go to waste or it'll go unnoticed. Yeah. So I've seen people that really master an instrument, but then they grow up and then they don't do anything with it. And so you wonder, what if they could have not wasted this skill? The credibility stage is the fifth stage. And this is that stage when you're getting noticed. It's the we did it stage, right? You've proven your competence, and you've got a certain expertise, and people trust you, and opportunities are being provided to you. The upside is that, people think well of you and they want to join your cause. You're a magnet, right? The challenge is that, in the credibility stage, credibility is hard to gain. It takes a long time, but it's easy to lose. You're just one mistake away from really potentially losing it. So you've got to guard yourself well, and you've got to stay upright, and you've got to, stay with integrity. That's what keeps you there. The last stage is the maximum impact stage. And this is really where we want to get to. This is where everything is multiplied. It's where your leadership multiplies and you take it all to the next level. It's that explosive growth stage. And the upside is that you can really just change a great deal. You can change a great deal of the world. You can do a lot of great things for people because you've been able to multiply yourself. You've been able to team up, and it just keeps working. And the challenge of that, of course, is that the bigger the machine you make, the harder it is to keep going. So there's definitely some challenges. So those are the stages. And, one of the big misconceptions, I think, when we're traveling through life is we think that time is going to automatically move us to the next stage. Like we're going to move from the dependent stage to the independent stage automatically. We're going to go from the independent stage to the interdependent stage just because time goes by. Kind of like maybe you're walking up a hill and there's some work to it, but you're walking up, but you will get there. But it's really not like that. It's not like an incline that takes a little bit of work. It's more like stair steps. In other words, what I mean is you can stay at one stage. You can stay there forever if you want to. And when you're on that stage and you're walking through that stage, trying to develop those habits and move towards the next one, think of it like a floor of a building. There's the floor, you can stay on that floor, but then to get to the next floor, there's steps that you have to take to get to the next one. And that's work. That's something that you can get there quickly, but it's a lot of work to get there. And so we really want to look at it like that. So you've got these stages of life. And the question is, how do I get to the next stage? It's not gradual. It's something that happens. Well, this is where the hurdles comes in here. So there are 5 hurdles that I have identified.
Can't wait to talk to you about these 5 hurdles, but hang on just a second, because I know our listeners, I've heard about this a couple of times and I'm super jazzed about it. And our listeners are trying to catch up to you. So these 6 stages, you described them really, really beautifully. And I love that point that we can stay in a stage, but if we're going to move to the next stage, it doesn't just happen. It's not just the passage of time that graduates us. We have to work at it. Let me just clarify, because I think I know the answer here, but I want to make sure that everybody hears the answer. One is not necessarily at the dependence stage in all things at all the time. So you could be in one stage for one thing and a different stage for something else. Your musical abilities is an example. I might be really, really rocking it at running a business or at being an employee. I might be at a stage, but I might have just picked up the guitar and I'm back in dependence again in the guitar playing. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, you can be at different places, different levels at different areas of your life. Like for me, for instance, my leadership development is at a different stage than my physical development. I'm in a different place on both of those. And I can pretty much identify what stage I'm in each one of those. Maybe my intellectual development might be something different. Maybe my parental prowess, is at a certain level, but you can break this down any way you want. And that's the beauty of this whole process, I think, is that you can put the categories into place and you can use this as a model to evaluate where you're at. And then the beauty of it is whatever stage you're in, you're going to be able to identify what hurdles you have before you. And that's what we're getting into right now, the hurdles. Another misconception that we have about hurdles is that we think that the things that keep us back and hold us back, we tend to think that those things are objects in the world, that there are circumstances, it's opportunities that somebody isn't giving us, it's problems that somebody might put on our shoulders, or maybe you're just being held back by something else. But the truth is that the major hurdles that really hold us back, and I think this applies to most everybody, aren't really the external hurdles, they're the internal hurdles. So I want to make sure that we make that clear, that these are the internal hurdles. These are the hurdles that we all face, and they're hurdles that can stop us in our tracks, and they can keep us from progressing, or they can launch us to the next stage. And really it's up to us because they are internal. They're something that we have control over. They're not something out there that somebody else has control over. There's things that we have control over. And that's one of the key parts to that is that we have that choice.
I know we haven't gotten to the 5 hurdles yet, and I know that's what we're here for, is the 5 hurdles to maximum impact. But I really want to hang out on that topic for just a second, because I think some of our listeners will be struck by, or maybe irritated by, maybe frustrated with your statement just now that these are internal hurdles. It's not something that happened to us. It's something that we have the ability to overcome, or they can stop us. So I'm thinking about all those folks who feel like, or the times in my own life when I felt like I've plateaued somewhere, right? I got somewhere and then that's it. I hit a plateau. That's the phrase. We see this in fitness. We see this in weight loss. We see this in professional development. Oh, I just plateaued. And we don't want to plateau, right? We want to get beyond that. And so you're saying there are some hurdles here, and they're internal, and we have the ability to tackle these hurdles and get to the next level. Is that what you're telling us?
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. So here's the thing. So with hurdles, sometimes they can feel like barriers. Okay. Sometimes they can feel like a brick wall that like goes all the way up that you can't get around, you can't get over. But the thing is about hurdles were meant to get past. Nobody puts a hurdle in the middle of a track so that all of the runners stop and don't go anywhere. No, they're there for a reason, to get past so that you can get to the next phase of the race, right? But we can look at these hurdles and we think they're a big brick wall. We misunderstand what they really are. We make them out to be much bigger and much more solid and much more restrictive than what they really are. And so it reminds me of just the story of how they train, baby elephants to just kind of stay where they're at. They put a rope around one of their legs, and they put a stake in the ground, and the baby elephant tries to pull away and they can't because they're not that big yet. And so they learn their boundary and they learn their limitation. They learn where they can't go because the stake tells them that they can't. And the thing is when that baby elephant grows up to be a grown elephant, they still stay this way, even though they're thousands of pounds and they're strong enough to pull the stake right out of the ground with ease if they want to. They don't believe they can. And so they're limited by something that's actually false. It's there, but it really isn't limiting. They just think it is. And so I think of that with us. I think we get in our own way. Sometimes we convince ourselves of things that we can't do when we really can do them. If we just look at these things as hurdles, something that might take some effort and it might take some help, but we can get over them. They're not a brick wall. They're not something that's just going to keep us helpless forever. And so I think that's key when we look at these hurdles, that we understand that there's the real hurdles and then there's the way we look at the hurdles, and they're not always the same thing. So, but the thing about these hurdles is unlike the stages, they don't take a long time to get through. You don't have to mature through them. You don't have to develop great habits to get through them. You just have to have a paradigm shift. You have to have that aha moment when something changes in your thinking, a new idea comes into your mind that you can't get past because you have to take it into account. It's a new idea that has to replace an old idea. Think about the flat earth. Several hundred years ago, they thought the earth was flat and everybody was convinced of it. And then somebody came along and changed that with the new paradigm, and everybody had to reconsider and think, oh, okay, this is a whole new idea, and everything changed. It didn't take, several centuries for people to figure that out. It was instantaneous. Once the information got there, it was instantaneous. So for us, these hurdles that we get past, we can get past them fairly quickly, but it does require a severe change in our thinking, a brand new paradigm, basically.
Yeah, and I think that thinking, that new paradigm, that's the hard part, right? Changing our thinking, changing our thought process, that does feel like a lot of work.
Right. And that's why these are all internal hurdles. If we're going to change our paradigm, other people really can't change them. All they can do is present information, because we're the ones that have the choice whether to believe it, whether to buy into it or not, right? Or when we observe something that's completely different than what we've experienced, we still have that choice. Are we going to pursue this? Are we going to accept this? Or are we going to run away from truth, right? So that kind of sets up our hurdles.
All right, this whole episode is supposed to be about 5 hurdles. The 5 hurdles to maximum impact. And so we've set them up. We understand kind of where they're coming from and what they might be. So let's talk about them one by one. So what is our first hurdle, Joel?
Yeah, the first hurdle, this is the hurdle that takes you between the dependent stage and the independent stage. So if you're on the dependent stage, in order for you to get to the independent independent stage, you've got to get over this hurdle. And that hurdle is the 100% responsibility hurdle. And that's because when you're a dependent, somebody else is 100% responsible for you. And in order for you to be independent, that has to shift. That responsibility has to somehow shift from them to you, and you have to be responsible for you. And so it's the I am 100% responsible for my life. That's kind of the major statement there. Other parts of that too would be, I will not rely on others to meet my personal needs. It's all on me. Think of a teenager when they go off to school or they move out of the home. All of a sudden now they've got these whole new responsibilities. Mama's not there to cook your meal for you. Mama's not there to do your laundry. It's on you now. And it's also, you have to realize that along with this responsibility, anything that you achieve going forward is entirely up to you. It's not up to somebody else to create opportunities for you. You have to create your own opportunities, by adding value to other people. So the 100% responsibility hurdle. The second hurdle, this is the hurdle that takes you from the independent stage to the interdependent stage. So here you are, you're on the independent stage. You can solve your own problems, right? And you can do your own thing, and you want to become interdependent, or life just requires you to become interdependent. So this stage is the it's not about you stage. It's not about you. And that's a tough lesson that we all have to hit. But imagine that, you're independent, you're a young adult, you're doing everything, you've got the world, by the tail, and you're living life on your own terms, and it smacks you around a bit because you don't understand interdependence. And this is when you come to the place where you've got to surrender. And there's some things about you that you have to surrender. There's some things that you value, that you really hold true, that have to go away. Those things are not anchored in principles. They're not anchored in truth, but they're anchored in what you want or selfish desire. Sometimes you got to get rid of the bad to make room for the good. And so we have to surrender some of that. So
I'm pausing there because I want to respond to this just a little bit. As you've hit on two of the hurdles so far. So the first was the 100% responsibility hurdle, and the second was the 100% surrendered hurdle. And as I think about those, let's take a new employee, for example. So a new employee shows up in a workplace and they don't know where the bathroom is. They don't know how to turn their machine on or where their machine is. And they don't know what they're supposed to do or any of the rules or the protocols or what they're supposed to wear. I mean, they may have gotten a handbook, but they probably didn't read it before that first day. And so here they are, and they really are entirely dependent on their supervisor. They're dependent on, or their manager and the team around them and the handbook to guide them through what they're supposed to do. So most of us as new employees, we want to get out of that pretty quickly. We don't like that feeling of being dependent on others. We want to be self-standing. And so we get kind of excited to get through that 100% responsibility hurdle that, okay, I got this. I'm in charge of my own success here in this organization. And so then they get to that second stage, that independent stage, and they're feeling all independent. And I'm thinking about the employees that I worked with who kind of got stuck, but they're not a great team player. They're not working well with others. They're kind of playing by their own rules. They're doing it their own way. Maybe they're not helping the new employees as the new employees who are after them start. They just want to kind of do it their way and play by their own rules, right? This is what you're describing, yes?
that's exactly right. And the thing is it's not about they. This isn't all they. We were at that place too. Everybody's been there. Because these are stages you have to go through. Nobody's born, in the interdependent stage. Nobody's born there. So we all go through that. We all have to get there. So yeah, it's interesting. But I mean, there's a place in your life where you got to realize that it's just not about me. You have to change those values that are about you. Those things, all of those values that you have that surround that theme of you, they have to be, you have to let go of them, and you have to grab a hold of other values that are anchored in the well-being of other people. It's interesting. And I think really this is probably this might be the most important stage, I'm guessing. I really think probably 80% of the people in our country anyway, and probably beyond, do not get past this stage because it's a hard stage to get past. It requires a certain giving up of self. But if you do, if you get past it, you're like, hey, I get it now. I can't just run solo on everything. And it's time for me to be part of a team. It's time for me to jump onto something bigger than myself. And so maybe that's what you do. You kind of make that surrender and you say, okay, all right, I'm part of the team. Let's do this. Let's do this together. I need you guys, and I'm willing to put your needs ahead of mine. And that's great. But here's the thing, you still haven't figured everything out yet.
No.
You're part of the team, but that doesn't mean that you're on the road to success yet. So you're part of a team, but there's a few things that are required for you to move on past this stage. And that is that you've got to have a good leader. You really do have to have a good leader that can help you get to that next stage. If you're going to be part of a team that's worth being a part of, it's got to have a leader that's worth following.
Mhm.
And so that's part of that. And if you don't have a good leader, everybody on that team will struggle to really be committed to each other, and they could very well slide back to the independent stage. And we've seen that happen. I've seen stores that were clicking, running well, or businesses running well together. Everybody seems to be on the interdependent stage, and switch in leadership, or maybe a change in the attitude of the leader, and everything seems to kind of fall apart, and that interdependence seems to dissolve. So
That's the second hurdle. So we got responsibility, 100%
yep,
responsibility hurdle, 100% surrendered hurdle. So talk
yep.
to us about the third hurdle.
Yeah, so this third hurdle is really huge too. And so when you think about what it requires for you to be your best, think about an Olympic athlete or somebody at the top of their field, a great musician that's just filled with talent and that, entertains the world with their talent. Those people got there because of one thing, and that is, well, more than one thing, but one thing that has to be there, and that is commitment. So this hurdle is the 100% commitment hurdle. In other words, you can never achieve great things by being partially committed. So this is the hurdle that you have to pass in order to go from the interdependent stage to the mastery stage. Okay. If you don't fully commit, you're just never going to get there. You're always going to fall short. And so this is the stage where you have to fully commit to the right things, and you have to uncommit to the wrong things. If you're going to be great at something, you have to remove all of the things that's going to get in the way and distract you from that. Right. And so this is the time where you make priorities. You start choosing to be great at something instead of mediocre at a bunch of things. You decide that there's a couple things I'm going to be great at, and then you fully commit to those. And so commitment is really huge to doing that. And the other part of that too is if you're going to be great at your profession or whatever you do, you have to learn how to finish. You have to learn how to finish the race. We live in a culture now where there's so many of us that are quitters. I was a quitter for the first half of my life. I seemed to quit everything. I just didn't feel like I wasn't anchored in the future. I didn't have anything really to shoot for. So I just quit everything because I was living in the moment. And if we want to really be great at something, we have to not live in the moment. We have to commit to something down the road. We have to commit to a result, to a skill and a mastery of something. And we have to hold on to that vision and work hard. And that has to be what we commit to. It's what we think about every day when we wake up. And it's what drives us to really work hard and to strive towards it. So we can't go anywhere of significance without commitment, no doubt. So
Sure. And that hurdle, as you describe it, that third hurdle, that's not just, sort of a haphazard or partial, half-hearted commitment. That is a 100% commitment hurdle.
yeah, we talk about the try harder effect. If you look at something and say, well, I'll try, I'll give it my best. Well, you'll never make it because that's not a commitment. That's a commitment to effort, not to results. And so if you value effort versus results, at some point you're not going to value effort. It's when effort becomes too much, then you'll just stop. So the commitment hurdle is you can't achieve mastery until you get past the commitment hurdle. So
all right, 3 so far. We got the 100% responsibility hurdle. We got the 100% surrender hurdle. We got the 100% commitment hurdle. What's next?
yeah. So the fourth is the 100% accountability hurdle. And this is the hurdle that you have to get past if you want to move to the mastery stage, from the mastery stage to the credibility stage. So the mastery stage is great, but just because you've mastered it, it doesn't mean that you're going to be credible yet. What if you don't do anything with that skill, right? No one sees it. You sharpen this axe and then you go bury it in the field. No one sees it. So part of this is that if we really want to be credible, if we want to have credibility for what we've done and what we've mastered, we really have to have accountability. Accountability is so key. Accountability basically makes no excuses. It says, hey, if this is my responsibility, it's my fault. There's an element of transparency that a leader that's seeking credibility, that's trying to get to the stage, they have to have humility. They have to have transparency. They have to have already let go of the right to be blameless. Okay. If you're going to be 100% accountable, there's going to be blame and you're going to have to absorb it. When it's your fault, it's up to you to say, hey, my bad. Or sometimes you might have to say, I'm really, really sorry. It's my fault. I did it. There's no excuses in the accountability hurdle. You've got to get past it. So if you've got hurdles, if you find yourself in a place where you're making a lot of excuses for things, I promise you, you're not in the credibility phase. You're still prior to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody's going to look at you as highly credible if you don't have integrity, if you don't have something to show for your work. And it doesn't matter what it is. If you're an Olympic athlete, people can look at you and say, wow, look at what this person has done. Look what their track record is. Look at how many victories they've had. Look at how many gold medals they have. That is credibility.
So using that Olympic athlete as an example, if we've got an example of, I think they made a movie about this that I remember watching years ago with ice skating, where the Olympic talented ice skater wasn't accepting accountability, right? They were not getting to gold. They were getting to silver or bronze perhaps, but not getting to gold. And they would blame it on their partner or they would blame it on their coach. They would not accept accountability. The gal didn't accept accountability for her own results. And it wasn't until she got to that point that she could say, wait, I own this. That was my mistake. And then she could take that accountability. She was a very, very capable, talented skater, but wasn't owning her own accountability. That's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And, you see every athletic team, any team that wins a Super Bowl, they don't get there by making excuses and blaming each other. They get there because they have each other's back. And when they make a mistake, they own it. And that's how teams work together. That's how you trust each other. That's how you have each other's back. And that's how you gel and work at the highest level you can possibly work, is by everybody being accountable for who they are and their part of the job. And so I think it's a high level. It really is a high level hurdle, and it's hard to get there. It really is hard to get there. In fact, not very many people really get to the point where they're fully transparent. Most people have a lot of things to hide, and they really have a hard time exposing their weaknesses and being accountable to their mistakes and so on and so forth. So we are talking about a little higher level now. So
this is hard stuff. Okay, so we got 5 hurdles to maximum impact. So we're making our way to maximum impact, but we had to overcome first the responsibility hurdle, and then second the surrender hurdle, third the commitment hurdle, and fourth the accountability hurdle. What's the last one? What's our last hurdle, Joel?
So the last hurdle is this is going from the credibility stage to the maximum impact stage. And so this is that last hurdle, and that is it's the 100% empowered hurdle. And there's a couple ways to look at this too. So the first rule to this hurdle is that you must first be empowered before you can empower others. Okay, you must first be empowered. In other words, if we'll stick with the Olympic athlete, if you're going to win a match, let's say you're an Olympic wrestler, you're going to win that gold medal, all of the work isn't going to be done in that moment, in that match. All of the work that gets you there and gets you that victory already came in the past in the form of you being empowered. You're being equipped along the way through your hard work, through other people working with you. You're being empowered and equipped so that when you go into that battle, you are fully armed and you've got all of the skills, all of the right mindset. You've got everything that you need to go in and do the job at a high level. And so that's really important. And in order for you to empower other people and to use your leadership skills to multiply what you are and what your team is, you've got to be first empowered, and then you've got to empower other people. And when you empower other people over and over, then you are multiplying your efforts. This is when things really take off. Sam Walton had one store for like 25 years. And he just kept making progress and progress. And then there came a time when he opened up a second store. And then it was much quicker that he opened up a third and a fourth. And all of a sudden it just took off, and they started. And that's what happens after the 100% empowered hurdle. In other words, he was fully empowered. He figured it out. He learned how to replicate what he'd already done because he was fully empowered. And then it was just about making it happen and multiplying his efforts. And so, and we can get to that same point too. And I think, if we keep pushing and pushing, then we can get there. We can get there. We can do the best we can with what God's given us, and we can hit maximum impact. But it's a long, long road, and it's very hard.
Yeah.
So, but it's a worthwhile challenge for sure.
Yeah. So we started with as you described this, I was thinking first of employment and employees that I've encountered and myself in my own journey. And I know those moments where that hurdle, especially as a business owner, that hurdle between mastery and credibility, right? That 100% accountability where I wanted it, I was committed. I knew I'd crossed that hurdle. I was 100% committed, but oh gosh, I'm trying to break into a discipline that is largely dominated by men, or oh gosh, I don't have my MBA, or oh gosh, I don't have these things under, how can I possibly, I'm raising toddlers, how can I possibly, it's not my fault, I'm trying to be a wife and a mom and a business owner at the same time. And so that
Right.
definitely that 100% accountability hurdle, getting over that, getting to a point of credibility. And so just continuing that journey. So I was thinking about employees, and then I was thinking about my daughter as a musician, and learning to pick up the violin at first, not even allowed to touch the violin until the instructor said, you can touch it and here are the pieces and here's how you learn. And became to the point where she could, independent stage where she could play and she could practice, and then interdependent, starting to work with others in an orchestra, right? And play with others, but without a leader, right? They could try and get two people to kind of practice together, but without a leader, without that director, without that orchestra driving them together, we're not gonna hear great sound. And then the idea even of a chamber orchestra, which then takes the orchestra, but a small group that are almost self-directed because they have that capability. But if that chamber orchestra, that small group of self-directed, if they never show anybody, if they never play for anybody, how do they get that credibility that they have that capability? Super,
That's
super
right.
cool analogy. So I can follow this in employment. I can follow it in my own example. I can follow it in growing one's skills as a musician, or growing one's skills in a hobby. It seems so widely applicable, Joel.
Yeah, yeah. So I've got a form that I've created, and I'm going to create a bunch more because there's so many categories we can apply this to. Like, for instance, in the workplace with the leadership, working with leaders of departments, leaders of groups of people, time management might be one category, priorities and focus, maybe efficiency and system, maybe a growth mindset, or planning and organization might be something that you want to evaluate. You could really look at any company's method of evaluating people, and you could plug any of those into there, and you could really look at what stage they're on. For instance, social and relational connections. Okay, you could look at that with any person, really. Where are we at? Are we dependent? Are we independent? And there's kind of a little definition that goes along with each one of these. So with the dependent stage, what I call this is low competence, unaware, reliant on others. Okay, with the independent stage, I call this competent, undirected, and undisciplined. Okay. With the interdependent, it's mutual edification and support. It's not about me.
Yep.
Right. And with the mastery, it's self-disciplined, habitual practice, and driven to excel.
Mm-hmm.
And the credibility is proven results, standing out, and in demand.
Mm-hmm.
And then maximum impact, it's impacting others at a high level, multiplying results. So there's a definition for each one of these stages. So it's easy to take this, identify where you're at, and look at the hurdles that you're up against. That's a great place to start for any kind of coaching or developing of people. And so that's what this was all created for. It's a way to get down to that, get down to the nitty-gritty of what we're really up against. So
super cool. Joel, thank you. This has really been insightful. As I think about highlights, a couple of the big takeaways that I want to make sure our listeners have heard. One of the things in particular is the idea of these 6 stages, and these 6 stages, they're not necessarily my stage for me as a whole person that covers everything about who I am, but it could be applied to any one of the skills that I'm trying to learn, or any one of the roles in which I find myself, or one of the disciplines. And then you talked about these hurdles, and I loved your comparison, the distinction between a hurdle and a brick wall, right? It's a hurdle, we just have to get over it. Then there was that really challenging piece about that it's an internal hurdle. So thank you for that. And then you talked about specifically the 5 hurdles: the 100% responsibility hurdle, the 100% surrendered hurdle, the 100% commitment hurdle, the 100% accountability hurdle, and the 100% empowered hurdle. So I feel like you've left us with some really great things to chew on. If you were to invite one of our listeners to, what would they do next? Okay, so they've heard this idea, and this concept is here. What should someone do next with this thought process?
Well, I'd be glad to talk to anybody about this. We are planning on doing something with this here down the road, some type of a training or an introduction. So you could always keep a lookout for that, but you're welcome to contact your Clear Next Step and ask for more questions. I'd be glad to have a conversation and talk through how we could use this to maybe benefit you or people in your organization the best we can.
Awesome.
So.
Thanks, Joel. And one of the questions that I always ask, and I'm going to, no exceptions here because it's the Even Better podcast. So Joel, what is it that's making you even better right now?
Well, I've been working on this, and I think there's a principle in place that teachers teach themselves as they go along, but they also need to be taught by others. And so for me, it seems like so much of what people have poured into me, I've been able to kind of take some of this and put it down in the form of a presentation. So I'm taking these bits and pieces. And so for me, it's reflecting on the past and the things that I've learned and trying to figure out how to make them work together and fit together. And so I've put a lot of thought into that lately. And so, none of these pieces came to me automatically. I wasn't born with them. These are things that I've learned and that's been taught to me by wiser people than myself. And then when I combine that with experiencing those things at the same time, then they become real. And so this was just about trying to figure out how to pass it on to more people. That's really what this is about. So, and I believe that these are based on universal principles. These are not based on values. They're based on universal principles. And I think when we learn to stop putting all of our eggs in the baskets of our values that aren't anchored to principles, and we start learning how to focus on our values that are anchored to principle, I think that's when we start to get alignment. When the things that we do are in alignment with the values that we hold, and the values that we hold are in alignment with the truth, the way things really are, the principles of the universe, then we're going to remove a whole lot of those hurdles, and we're going to be freed from those hurdles. So I think that's what we're all looking for. We don't like brick walls, but if we can remove the brick walls and make them into hurdles and then get past them, gosh, the finish line is within sight, and we can get it. We can get there. We can do a lot of great things.
Well, that's outstanding. Thank you, Joel. Well, and thank you to all of our listeners for joining in today. On behalf of all of us here at Your Clear Next Step, this is Sinikka Waugh wishing you a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.